Good afternoon. I'm Maryam Alavi, Dean of Georgia Tech's Scheller College of Business, and welcome and thank you for joining us. Today's conversation, held in honor of International Women's Day, is with Carol Tomé, CEO of UPS. Carol has graciously accepted our invitation to share her insights on leadership and organizational change and transformation with us today. Carol became the 12th CEO in the 114-year history of the company in June of last year, having served as a board member at UPS since 2003. She is the first woman CEO of the company and one of the only 3 women leading a Fortune 50 company today. Before joining UPS, Carol was an executive vice president and chief financial officer at the Home Depot. Carol, thank you for making time for this conversation today. I can only imagine the tremendous demand on your time, and we are very grateful for the time you're sharing with us today. I will start by asking you a number of questions, and then we will open it to the audience for their question. To those in the audience, please submit your questions through the Q&A feature of the software tool, and Carol will address some of the questions toward the end of our session. Ready to start, Carol?
I'm ready.
Wonderful. Let me start, Carol, by asking you to please describe your leadership approach and philosophy for us.
Well, first, Maryam, just let me say how thrilled I am to be with you today and to have an opportunity for this fireside chat. I wish we had a fire, but we're making it work digitally. You know, from a leadership perspective, I was really blessed to have worked for Home Depot for almost 25 years. And I learned at Home Depot the power of the inverted management construct, which is another way of talking about servant leadership, where leaders are at the bottom of the pyramid because we bear the weight for the actions that we take and the decisions that we make. We bear that weight so that we can free up our employees, our people, empower them to do the right thing, to take care of their customers. I believe in that. I believe that I'm here not for me, but for everyone else. I didn't understand that when I was early in my career, but now I do. I understand the power of the inverted pyramid, the power of servant leadership.
Excellent. Who is or was the leader that you admire the most, and why?
Oh, I'm incredibly blessed because I worked with some amazing leaders. If I think about back to my Home Depot days, Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank, the founders of that fantastic company, I had the opportunity to work with all 5 CEOs in that company. You know, Frank Blake and I went through the last recession, which was driven by a housing crisis. It was an incredible experience to learn so much from Frank. Craig Menear, who is the existing CEO of Home Depot, what an amazing leader he is. These are values-based leaders, and I learned the power of living your values and what values mean to a culture. And something that Peter Drucker said years ago, he said that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I believe that to my core. And I could go on and on. I've had amazing women mentors in honorship of International Women's Day. I think about one of the first mentors I had when I joined the Home Depot was a woman by the name of Faye Wilson. She was a banker. She was a highly successful banker ahead of her time because, you know, even today there aren't that many women in leader roles in banking, but Faye was is an amazing person and was someone who I learned a lot from. In fact, the very first time I walked into her office, the office was pristine. Nothing on her desk except for a book. And when I looked over at the title of the book, it was The Art of War. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot to learn from this woman. And I learned a lot from her.
That's certainly the names you mentioned are just all amazing leaders, such as yourself. So let me ask you, what role do you think business can play in tackling major societal challenges. For example, things like social injustice and inequality, climate and environmental issues, etc.
Um, so, I've been in the workforce or workplace for 40 years. And I used to believe that the purpose of the corporation was to create value. Milton Friedman, we all studied that, right? And the purpose of the corporation is to create value. But actually, as I've come to think about it, I actually think the purpose of the corporation is to attend to the needs of all stakeholders. And by attending to the needs of all stakeholders, the paradox is that you do create value for your share owner. So for us at UPS, we take this very seriously. We are a values-based company, a company that has always been committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, a company that's been committed to doing right by our communities by giving back through our philanthropic efforts, a company that is a first responder. When things go wrong, we're there. We're there to help the communities, a company who believes that we need a healthier planet, and we have invested in driving down our carbon consumption, which, as you can appreciate, is hard for a company like UPS. Our drivers drive over 2 billion miles a year. We fly aircraft every day. In fact, we have 180 flights coming out of Asia every week. So we consume a lot of carbon in our company, but we are investing in carbon neutral activities, be it electric vehicles. We've just signed a pilot, for example, for a feeder aircraft powered by a battery. How cool is that? We were the first company to be authorized by the FAA to have a drone airline. So we have a drone airline, UPS Flight Forward. So we are investing in a healthier planet because it's part of taking care of the need of all stakeholders. And so I believe it to my core. It's our responsibility.
Well, these are amazing innovations and foresight on your part and on part of UPS. You already touched upon this, but I'd like to get a little deeper into this. We had UPS's Global Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Sue Schmidlhofer, on a DEI panel at Scheller College a couple of weeks ago, and she did a great job in giving us an overview of activities in the area of DEI at UPS. But please give us the CEO's perspective on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion at UPS. And I know there's a lot of activity going on in that arena at your company.
Yeah. Well, simply said, diversity, equity, and inclusion is good for business. If we look like the customers we serve, it's just going to be a better experience for all of us together. It's good for business. And there's been so much research done in this regard that says the more diverse you are, the more inclusive you are, the more equitable you are, the more value you create for your share owners. So there's a compelling business case that supports our activities. And by the way, it's just the right thing to do. But I have to tell you, we've had to step it up a lot. I onboarded or was named the incoming CEO in March of last year. I took the chair on June 1st. And before I took the chair, I had taped a video to go out to our worldwide UPSers. We have 540,000 people in our company around the world. So I taped a video to go out to all of our UPSers to talk to them about how excited I was to be joining the company and what we were going to do together and that we were going to have some fun and kick some ass. And, it was a very, I had hoped it to be a very motivational, aspirational video. And then the George Floyd killing happened. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't run this video without talking about what this meant to me. And I was so saddened by that. I was ashamed. I was mad. I was sad, just so many emotions. So I sat down at my kitchen table and I penned a note to UPSers about how I felt and how I wanted to turn my anger into action by living our values. And that note went out before the video so that the UPSers could get to know me and what I felt. There's no place for bigotry or racism at UPS. And we're not going to stand idly on the sidelines. We're just not. So we're leaning into this in a major, big way. And as we thought about how we could do that, I'm like, you know what? diversity, equity, and inclusion should be a strategic imperative for our company. So we named a new Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, Charlene Thomas. She's a direct report to me. So she's on our executive team. Oftentimes in companies, diversity, inclusion, they get tucked into HR or they get tucked into other activities. In fact, for us at UPS, it had been tucked into our foundation. And I'm like, nope, this is an executive role. It's a strategic imperative. And we're just going to really lean into this because we should. Because of our presence, we are the largest logistics company in the world. We should be leaders in this regard. People should look to us and say, oh, they know how to do it. They do it right. So we're really committed to it, and I'm excited about it because the business case is we already know the business case. It's just good for business.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And you mentioned something that I'm wondering about. This is a huge organization. Global, huge organization, many countries. How do you, as the CEO, think about communication so that your message, your values, on a consistent basis gets to everybody? It's a non-trivial communication task. So I'd like to hear a few words about that, if you will.
Yeah, so with 540,000 people in the company, I know that I will not be able to meet every person. I know it's just not practical. Breaks my heart because I'm a real people person and I would like to, but I know it's not practical. So I've had to really think about how do I reach our people. Now, when I onboarded, I thought I would be traveling the world because to your point, we deliver packages in 220 countries and territories around the world. I thought I would be traveling the world, meeting with people, walking our facilities, shaking their hands. Of course, that hasn't happened with COVID. There's been very little travel, actually. I have gotten out some. I've done a ride along. So I went out with one of our drivers and I delivered packages. So I've gotten out some, but not as much as I would like. So what I've been trying to do is this. I hold skip level meetings with UPSers. So I skip down several levels and just listen to people. And these listening sessions have been really helpful to me as a new leader. So I can hear what's on top of people's minds. What are they worried about? What do they care about? That's been very helpful to inform the actions that we've been taking as a company. I also communicate out once a month in a video format, what I call wildly important. And I talk to people about what's wildly important to me. And I'm hoping that in the messaging, they're getting to know me a bit as a person, not just what is wildly important to me. So I'm hoping a bit of my personality is coming through in that as well. And as soon as I can get out and travel, I will. The other thing I did early on in my tenure is I looked at just communication broadly in the company and found that we were a bit disjointed in all candor. We had employee communication in HR. We had our public relations communication in our marketing group, investor communication in the investor group. You get my point. It was very scattered. So I created a new position, which is our Chief Corporate Affairs and Communication and Public Affairs Officer. So I pulled it all together so that we could have a more complete and concise message to our team and sort of one version of the truth, right? Rather than hearing it from multiple places, let's kind of focus it in on one area. So that seems to be working well too.
Wonderful. Well, that seems to be a great approach. Tell us about UPS's role in vaccine delivery.
Yeah, so we're really proud to be part of this moment. We've been in the healthcare logistics business for 15 years. Many people don't know that. So we have been delivering vaccines. Think about smallpox vaccines or influenza vaccines. We are an expert in cold chain logistics. We just are. We have over 11 million square feet devoted to healthcare logistics around the world. As it relates to this vaccine, we kind of got ahead of it. We stood up freezer farms. We have a freezer farm in Louisville, Kentucky, which is where our large airport is. So we have a freezer farm in Louisville, Kentucky, and we have another freezer farm in the Netherlands. We also invested in the manufacturing of dry ice because, as you know, the Pfizer vaccine needs to be frozen. It needs to be shipped with dry ice. So we can manufacture up to 1,200 pounds of dry ice an hour. So we got ahead of that as well. As we were working, we've been members of Operation Warp Speed since the beginning, and really preparing for the authorization of the vaccines. We didn't know when it was going to happen, but we reserved capacity in our network so that when the first vaccine was approved, we'd be able to ship it. Now, let me just take a minute and tell you how complicated this is. When the Pfizer got the approval to release the vaccines, we were ready. We drove a feeder truck, which is one of those 18-wheeler big trucks. We drove a feeder truck to their manufacturing site in Michigan, and they loaded the vaccines onto that feeder truck. The feeder truck then drove to a nearby airport. The vaccines were taken off the feeder truck and loaded onto a UPS Browntail, a 747 aircraft. That 747 airplane flew to Louisville, Kentucky, where our largest airport. The vaccines were taken off that plane. They were processed with special labeling so that we will never lose them. The labels have a battery inside of them. The vaccines were processed into the packages, put on feeder aircraft. The feeder aircraft flew to the destination city, let's say Houston. They were taken off the destination city and off the destination aircraft, put onto a brown package car, just like the package car that comes to your house. They were put onto the brown package car and delivered to the dosing site. And we have a command center that watched that vaccine from the moment we picked it up to the moment it was delivered at the destination site. And we do all that every day in less than 20 hours. It's complicated. It's complicated. But it's exciting. It's really exciting to be part of it. And golly, our delivery is 99.9% effective, which means we're delivering on time, which is super important for these vaccines.
Well, this is truly impressive. And I'm thinking, yes, it is so complicated and only UPS can pull something like that. So it's amazing. Next question. What is your vision for the future of UPS?
Well, it's multifold. We are the largest logistics company in the world. So how do we leverage our scale? How do we leverage our scale to continue to grow and to continue to earn the right to grow? And by that, I mean lean into the experiences that our customers want. You know, the world around us is changing very quickly. Our customers are changing, our competitors are changing, and the rate of change is accelerating. So, for example, last year, our small and medium-sized business customers said, you're not fast enough. You're too slow. It takes you too long to get a package to me. So we had an initiative that we called our Fastest Ground Ever initiative, and it was underway, but it wasn't to complete until the June of 2021. So when I onboarded, I said, all right, how can we speed this up? This is what our customers want. We need to do this to earn the right to serve them. How can we speed this up? And the team said, we just need some money. I'm like, we've got money. So we invested into the experience. We sped it up. We got it done 8 months ahead of time. And it translated into some pretty good results. In fact, we had the highest growth rate in that customer segment that we've seen in 10 years in the fourth quarter. So we're really leaning into the customer experiences to allow us to grow. I'm very excited about what we're going to be able to do outside of the United States. We are underpenetrated in certain markets outside the United States. And we have a different model outside of the United States than we do inside of the United States. It's more asset light with outside service providers. So it's a very, very profitable model too. So we're going to be leaning in our international growth expansion plans in a pretty big way because we should. We have the right to do that. We have the will to do that. And with the opportunity is rich. So our goal as a leadership team, you know, we're 114 years old. You know, we're an old company. Our goal is to make sure that we're around for the next 114 years, which means what got us here isn't going to get us there. We got to continue to lean in a changing customer experience. We've got to be nimble, agile, think about doing things differently than we have in the past. It's critically important. Part of that, of course, will be driven by technology. And if you think about UPS, you should think about us not only as a logistics company, but as a technology company too. We've got, you know, drones in the sky, autonomous vehicles on the road. We've got robots in pilot that are loading package cars and unloading package cars. I mean, how cool is that? We use technology to power our global smart logistics network. We have technology that we've built, like all of our route navigation is built, but then we use a lot of SaaS as we think about the customer experience. So most of our development now is done in the cloud. A lot of it's with SaaS providers. So technology is really going to drive us going forward. It's part of our secret sauce, I think.
Sounds truly exciting in terms of your vision for innovation. And one of the things that I have read about is, of course, customer is the starting point for any business. How do you go about figuring out the unmet needs of the customers and or the emerging needs of the customers? Because a lot of times customers, of course, they know what they don't like, but they don't necessarily know what the possibilities are. For example, no one asked for Google Maps. No one asked for this search engine for Google. No one asked for Netflix. No one asked for eBay, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we go into some of those uncharted territories, if you will, in relation to customer needs and wants?
Yeah, so we go about it a couple of different ways. First, we measure customer satisfaction with our small and medium-sized businesses through a Net Promoter Score. So they rate us on a number of attributes, and we roll it up to a Net Promoter Score. And we've declared that we want our Net Promoter Score to be higher than 50%. It's not. It's in the 30s, but we want it to be higher than 50%. So we can track how we're doing relative to what they want us to do. But to your question about what haven't they imagined, right? What haven't they imagined? We are an engineering-driven company. When you think about UPS, I mentioned technology. You got to think about it as engineers too. A lot of engineers. We've got lots of industrial engineers. This is perfect for Georgia Tech, by the way. Got lots of industrial engineers. We got mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, you name it, we got them. And they are constantly piloting new features. They're the dreamers. They're the ones who are saying, hey, you might like this. For example, no customer said that they wanted us to track their package for them. We delivered something called My Choice. And if you sign up for My Choice, you can track your package wherever it is along its delivery journey. Now we've done that. They're like, this is cool. And others have done it as well, but we were the first to go out with that because we thought they might want that. And oh, by the way, they do. And we have, I'm going to be wrong on the number, something like 73 million who have signed up for it. A lot of customers really value this. Yeah.
That's exciting. I like this idea of the dreamers in the company that constantly think about these new features and they pilot it. To your point, this whole issue around innovation is the only way for all organizations and all industries to continue to thrive, because as you said, what got us here is not going to get us to where we need to be.
It just isn't.
It just isn't. And given the rate of change, and by the way, mostly technology driven, it's no company or industry can assume that the future is just a linear extrapolation of the past. Absolutely not. So how does your team of executives, how do you yourself think about making sense of what's going on around us in the environment, internal to the company, external to the company? It seems like sense making is becoming a really important aspect of all executives and certainly CEOs. What does that mean? Kind of a question. And by sense making, I mean meaning making, framing the issues, trying to understand what goes on. And I'm interested in your personal ways that you go about sense making of what's going on in the world.
Well, we have a pretty robust strategic planning process that's evergreen. And I think that's critically important because we're constantly doing environmental scans and bringing back to the table what we are observing, seeing, and then talking about it. We meet weekly as a leadership team to talk about what's going on in the business, but also about what we're seeing and adjusting to the change. And it has to be that rapid fire. You know, we talk about focusing on those things that are wildly important. The list of wildly important continues to evolve. In fact, last Monday, we took something off the list 6 months ago, it was wildly important. It's just not anymore. Something else is much more important. So we are constantly rejuggling the wildly important list, constantly making sure that new projects don't creep in that aren't important, because that just is a resource drain, right? And talking about it broadly, I would say we've got some ways to go here. We're not as agile as we should be. It's hard when you're this big and you've had years and years and years of doing it one way. We kind of have over-engineered our practices in some ways, and we're trying to bring more agility in. But the only way I think you can get sense is to talk about it and lean not in into your own intentions, right? Don't believe you have the answers. The answers are with the customer. The answers are outside of your company, not inside. They're outside, and spending more time with them really important. And I would also say be crystal clear about your vulnerabilities. Oftentimes what companies do is they're like, well, yeah, maybe that's a vulnerability, but look, we've got leading market share, so it's okay. We're good. We're great, because you can't do that. You have to be really clear and critical about your vulnerabilities and then address them, or else you could end up being disrupted. This is talked about all the time, right? Disrupt or be disrupted. I really worry about all companies. If they don't really grab a hold of this, they could be gone. They could just be gone.
Certainly that's a very plausible scenario for many companies. So I want to get to ask you about a little bit about your personal story. Why UPS? Why now?
Yeah, so Maryam, as you know, I had retired.
Right.
So I retired. I had a lovely career at
Well,
Home Depot.
Carol, I want to say that you flunked retirement. I'm
I
sorry to
did,
tell
yeah.
you.
No, I retired. I stood up my family office, created a family foundation with my husband. I had joined some corporate boards. I was spending time at my 550-acre farm, and I was moving on to my next chapter. So this wasn't like on the list of things to do. But
Right.
UPS, I've been on the board of UPS for a long time, and they were working with David Abney, who was the CEO at the time, on succession planning. And as the board started to work with David on succession planning, they created a persona of the skills and experience that they thought the next CEO should have. And they took that persona and mapped it up against the existing leadership team of UPS. And we have an outstanding leadership team. But no one was quite ready. They didn't quite ready fit that persona. So the board decided to go outside. And when they made the decision to go outside, they came to me and said, would you like to be considered? And I'm like, me? I'm old, I'm retired. I'm like, me? So they're like, yeah, we'd like you to consider it. They did an outside search, but they said, we'd like you to consider it. So I'm like, well, let me think about it. So as I sat back and thought about it, I'm like, okay, why would you do this, Carol? Well, the first thing is UPS is a values-based business, and that's really important to me, and our values are aligned. And that's super important to me. So I'm like, this is a great company whose values match my values, so there will be a fit. I knew the company, and I loved what we did. We don't just deliver packages. We stand for so much more than that, so much more than that. So I thought there would be a good fit. The second thing is I looked at the capital that we had deployed into the company and the resulting financial results. And the stock price had been flat. So, we'd put a lot of capital in the company. The return on capital was down something like 400 basis points, and the stock had been flat for 6 years. And I'm like, I think I could get in there. I think I could figure out a way to create value. And I really do like to make money, and I really do like to create value. So I'm like, I think that I could do that. And then I thought, what really turns me on, what I really like to do is develop people. And with 540,000 people, a real opportunity to develop people and help them reach their highest potential, whatever it may be. So that was pretty compelling to me. And then I watched what the board was going through as they were going through the CEO succession. And I'm like, gosh, Carol, if you could get in there and develop CEO successors, so when it's time for you to leave, the board chooses someone from inside, that would really be great. Because going to the outside is hard, and you never know that that's going to work. We know the corporate world is littered with mistakes made by bringing people from the outside who don't fit. So I'm like, okay, check, 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 all these reasons for doing it. Then I asked my husband, whom you know, I asked Ramon, I'm like, Ramon, what do you think? And he's like, would you please go back to work? I was driving him crazy.
That's
So I'm like,
funny.
all right.
I can see Ramon saying that. He's just such an amazing person. I can see him saying that.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's like, go, he wants me to be happy, and I was driving him crazy. So I'm like, all right, because this is a family decision. This isn't your decision. It's a family decision. So with his support, I said yes, and the board said yes, and there you go.
That's a great story. I love hearing it. We have many brilliant students in the audience, Carol, who inspired to get into leadership roles. Give us two leadership advice. You have already given us a lot of them, but two, maybe repeat some of them if you prefer. Give us two leadership advice with one particularly aimed at women.
Yeah. So I think don't be too planful. Because if you're too planful, you may miss out on an opportunity. You know, I started my career as a banker 40 years ago. Never, ever did I envision I'd be running the largest logistics company in the world. Ever did I imagine that. And I thought I would just be a banker, right? I love banking. I thought that's what I would do. But opportunities came their way. And I took those opportunities. And they charted a really fun, interesting career progression where done some really cool, amazing things and worked with amazing leaders along the journey. So don't be too planful. And I think this is true for men as it is for women. I think the second piece of advice is really build your network. And I think this is critically important for everyone, but I think it's very important for women because oftentimes women find that they're balancing work and family and are not taking the time to build out the network. The network is so very important. And you can do that through activities with your church or with your schools or with community. But building the network is key because these are men and women. If you build out a wide network, these are men and women who can support you along the journey, who can be your personal board of advisors, right? Your personal board of directors. If you've got a strong network, I have been building my network for 40 years. I've got an amazing Rolodex. It's an amazing Rolodex. And so if I run into a challenge or a problem or a situation that I'm like, don't really know how to handle this, or I just need some advice, I just go to my network. And because of my network, when opportunities present themselves, people say, well, at least particularly when I was younger in my career, people would say, oh, do you know Carol? Have you met Carol? She'd be great for this opportunity. You know, I did some very cool things. You know, I was on the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank board for 6 years. I chaired that board for 3 of those years. And that was a pretty cool thing when I think about it, because there aren't that many women who are involved in that role. And it was even more poignant for me because my father was on the Federal Reserve Bank board of the Kansas City Fed. And we at the time, and I don't know if it's still true today or not, but at the time we were the only father-daughter duo that had ever served the Federal Reserve Bank system. So, you know, but that's the power of the network. So I would just really, those two lessons I think are important.
That's great. Looking back at your journey, Carol, is there anything that you have done that you wish you hadn't, or vice versa? Something that you didn't do that later on thought you should have done it?
Oh, yeah. I could spend all day talking about things I did wrong. All day. But, you know, I learned from them. So that's the most important thing. I'll tell you, the thing that I didn't understand early on in my career is the importance of surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you, better than you, faster than you. It's not about you. It's about your team. Really, really handpicking people that you want to work with who can lift you up and give you wings so that you can do more. I didn't understand that. And sometimes what that does, it means it takes longer to fill a role, right? Because you're looking for that person who's better than you, faster than you, smarter than you. And you want to fill the job, so you just hire somebody in. And then you're like, oh boy, that wasn't a good hire. So I now understand really the power of the team and the importance of surrounding yourself with the very best. And also regardless of where you are in your career journey, about the importance of doing for others, about building deposits, right? If you do for others and you build deposits in your personal bank account, when you need to take withdrawals, it's okay. Because sometimes you do need to take withdrawals. Sometimes you screw something up. You're like, I'm so sorry I messed this up. You can take that withdrawal because you've already built up enough deposits. If you've never built up the deposits and then you have to take the withdrawal, you go overdrawn. That's not a good place to be. It's not a good place to be, right?
Well, those are great pieces of advice, and sharing your experience certainly makes great sense. So I know that there are many people in the audience that would love to have the opportunity of asking you a question. So let me now turn it, see if there are any questions from the audience. Liz?
We have a number of really good questions, and I'm going to start. Ms. Tomé, if I followed you around during the course of your workday, what are some personal habits or stylistic traits I would observe that make you a more effective leader?
Well, some personal habits. I always have a Diet Coke in the morning. It's probably not good, but I always have a Diet Coke. That's after 2 cups of coffee, by the way. So I get up around 4:30 or 5, and I work out in the morning. Then I do my emails, and I've got lots of emails that I've got to get through. So I have a sundown rule. I do not go to bed without answering every email that I've received. And so then, because we are a global company, emails come in over the night. So I continue that sundown rule before I come to work, so I answer every email. So that's just a very good practice. If people are like, you read your own emails, you don't screen them, I'm like, I read my own emails. I read my own customer letters, good, bad, indifferent. I read them all because it's a way for me to learn about what our customers are experiencing with us. I think it's critically important. I spend most of my time during the day with team members giving feedback. I'm a ground engaged CEO. I'm not a fly high CEO. I'm into the details. I like to understand the details. I love the details. I love to engage. I love to have debate. I love to just see how people think and to stretch people's brains because I think it's a great way for developing. And then every day I try to have a day on just like listening, a listening exercise where people are telling me what's going on. I just had one yesterday. It was so awesome. This UPSer out in the field sent me a note and said, if you really want to know what's going on, I'll tell you. So I'm like, I really want to know what's going on. So we had a Zoom and it was awesome. And he's like, I can't believe I'm talking to you. I'm like, you sent me the note. I'm going to listen to you. And it was a really an awesome experience. So hopefully those are just some of the traits, things I do.
Thank you.
Welcome.
What part of your role as CEO was the most surprising or that you didn't know would be part of the role before you took it?
So I had heard that this is a very lonely job. I had heard that. And I'm like, oh, how lonely can it be? It's a really lonely job. It is. Oftentimes people only tell you what they think you want to hear. So you have to pry out really what's going on. I come in by myself, I leave by myself. It's not like I'm in a team because I'm the CEO. It's lonely. And I'd heard that. So what I've realized is there are reasons why there are organizations like the Business Council or the CEO Roundtable or the Business Roundtable, because it's a group of CEOs who come together because we're all lonely. But it's good because we're talking about the things that are facing all of our companies. Be it, what are we going to do when COVID is behind us and we think about bringing people back to work? How do we bring people back to work? How do we think about climate change? How do we think about policy? How do we think about racism? How do we think about, all the various issues that are facing all of our companies, regardless of our industry? So that ability to come together with other CEOs and just talk about these issues has been really, really helpful to me, I must say. I'm just so grateful for those relationships.
What is the most influential book you have read, and how has it shaped the way you take action in various aspects of your life?
I think from a business perspective, I always go back to good to great. Jim Collins. It's an old one, but it's a good one. I am a big believer in the hedgehog concept. What are you passionate about? What are you best in the world at? And what drives your economic engine? If you can answer those three questions and live those three questions, you can do amazing things as a company. So I love, love, love all of his writings, actually, from a business perspective. I'm just reading the new Bill Gates book on climate change. If you haven't read it, I would recommend it. It's probably the easiest read on climate change that I've come across, because this can be very complicated if you're not a scientist. And I really think that's a very well-written book and very helpful as we think about how we must lean into a healthier planet. So I would recommend that. Then, candidly, I go back to the Bible. I mean, it is my source of inspiration, my source of strength. I'm pretty spiritual, got deep faith, and it helps me every day.
With COVID came new challenges to organizations who typically had an office culture. How does UPS as a whole engage their employees to feel like they belong to one culture?
Yes. So, gosh, if you can appreciate what it was like at UPS, when COVID hit, we weren't prepared. We were delivering packages, but we weren't prepared. We didn't have the PPE that was necessary, the masks, the gloves, the hand sanitizers. We didn't have the cleaning protocol that was necessary. We didn't have the operating procedures that was necessary to continue to stay as essential workers. So it was a mad scramble to get our people protected so that they could continue to deliver your packages. So for a while, it was really chaotic around here as we were trying to earn the right to stay essential. We had to get a permission to fly. The Chinese authorities were not letting us come into the country. There were lots of things that we had to do very quickly just to stay in business. And then for our office workers, we had to send them home. And we're like, all right, you're going to go home. We need to make sure you've got connectivity. So our IT team did a masterful job of making sure that our teams had connection in a safe environment because, oh, by the way, every day we've got cyber attacks coming at us. So we had to make sure that all of our information was secure as people were working from home. So I give a big shout out to our IT team who enabled us to do that. As a leadership team here, we decided, because the majority of our people every day are putting their uniforms on and sorting and delivering packages, that we'd come in. So we have our headquarters here in Atlanta. This building that I'm in holds around 2,700 people. Every day there's no more than 200 people, but there is a group of us that come in every day. Now we are socially distanced and wearing masks when we're together and that sort of thing, but we think it's important to be here to support our teams. As it relates to the rest of the groups who are working remotely, we've tried very hard to keep connectivity. I don't think we've missed the beat on productivity. I really don't. I worry about connectivity. It's not the same, right? You can go down to the lunchroom and see your friends and, sit down and talk about the football game last night or whatever. It's not the same. Our teams have done a pretty good job of trying to have those experiences electronically through Zooms, or this is Blue Jeans, through whatever media that you use. But it's hard, and I worry about it. As we think about bringing our people back to work, what we're hearing is this. Many of our people like working at home. They like the freedom it's given them from a commuting time. People have said, gosh, I used to commute 2 hours to go to work. Now I don't have that commuting time. So I'm actually working a little bit longer. Or I'm able to put dinner on the table for my family. Or I'm able to go exercise, or whatever it may be. So they like that work environment. They say we're more productive. There are lots of reasons for continuing to allow remote working. So we're going through, what does the future of work look like for us? We're not planning to bring people back until September 1st, so we've got some time to figure it out. But my belief is it's going to be very different than it was, that we will have permanent people working from home. We'll be more hoteling in the offices buildings. We're going to free up some office space. We just won't need as much office space as we have. And then we'll figure out community events where we can bring people together so that we don't lose that connectivity. And we can do that through our foundation. For example, we just planted a bunch of trees in honor of John Lewis for Black History Month. That's a great way of building people together. You do something for the community and you bring your teams together. So we're going to figure this out. We don't have it all figured out yet, but super important that we listen to what our employees want. that we don't lose productivity and we don't lose our culture or loyalty to us. Because, that's a risk, right? If if our employees don't feel like they belong, they could go someplace else, and we don't want that. So this is something that keeps me up at night a lot, actually, as we think about the future of work.
What traits or mindsets do you look for in building out a great team?
Well, I think, there are certain just table stakes. You got to be a master of your craft, right? You got to be really good at what you do. But that's sort of table stakes. What I'm really looking for are you a great people leader? Are you a great developer of people? Show me the number of people who've been promoted that you've worked with, either in the company or outside of the company. I have 15 people that work for me who are CFOs of publicly traded companies. To me, that's a huge measure of success, right? That's a measure of I know how to develop people. So that's critically important, because without people, we're toast. So are you a good people developer? Do you check your ego at the door? We all have egos, but do you check it at the door? Are you truly a servant leader? Or if it's all about you, you don't really fit on my team, because it just doesn't work for me. You've got to be able to check your ego at the door and be a true servant leader. And are you curious as a cat? Are you curious? Are you just intellectually curious? Do you ask that second and third and fourth questions because you want to know how it works, or you want to know what the customer is thinking, or you want to know what that competitor is doing? Do you read a lot of newspapers, and is it driving you to, or however you get your news? You can get it electronically too, socially. Are you thinking about what that implications are to our company? So those are some of the traits I look for. I mean, of course, integrity and all that good stuff, but those are some of the unique traits I look for.
What are your best practices for maneuvering in a male-dominated world?
Well, I've always been in one, so I guess it's just sort of become like what it is. Because, whether it was finance, which was male-dominated, or home improvement retailing, which is male-dominated, and I was a banker before that, and worked in manufacturing and paper and packaging, male-dominated, and now logistics, male-dominated. I think what I've learned is just to be me, just to bring my real, genuine, authentic self to the table. Don't try to assimilate. Don't try to be like anybody else. Just be me. Bring my authentic self to the table. Let people get to know me for who I am and what I can do. And it's translated into pretty good success so far.
What advice would you give a middle-aged woman or women who have changed careers later in life and are now trying to build up and perhaps compete against coworkers half your age?
Well, that would be me. So, I'm 64. So, yeah, that would be me. And I think what the important thing is to make every day a learning day, right? Every day is a learning day. Because we have to remember that some of the people that we're working with, they were born with an iPhone in their hands, right? When I was a girl, I talked to an operator. I would pick up the phone and say, "Operator, may I have?" And I would give the telephone number. So the world has just changed. And we've got to make every day a learning day. And you can do that by having reverse mentoring. You have so much to offer. As you're older in your career, older in your life, you have so much to offer in terms of wisdom and experience and maturity and calmness, right? Very few things wig me out, because I've just kind of seen it all, been there. I'm like, we can get through this, we can get through that. Let's approach this from a problem-solving perspective, not an emotional perspective. So as an older person, you have so much to offer, but you have so much to learn. And reverse mentoring is a great way to learn. So you can get younger people talking to you about new technology, new ways of coding. There are simple ways, right? Simple solutions through the use of artificial intelligence, through the use of bots, through the use of machine learning. Get educated on that. Learn, so that you don't feel like you're competing with it. You're learning with them. You're sharing and you're learning at the same time. That just, I think, it would be a fantastic way to continue to grow your careers, wherever you are in your career.
You are such an eloquent speaker. Could you share some tips or best practices on how you developed your communication skills?
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm going to tell you a true story. When I was named the CFO of the Home Depot, 2001, that's 20 years ago, I went to New York to give my first investor presentation. I was all by myself. And I went in front of the room to give my investor presentation. And I'm in the front of the room giving the investor presentation, and I thought I was great, right? I'm just pitching my heart out. There was a man in the front row who fell sound asleep. Now, that was bad, but he didn't fall just sound asleep. He fell out of his chair onto the floor. So I jumped off the dais and like, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? And he got himself up and he put his glasses back on, and I went back up and I finished my presentation. And then afterwards, I was leaving the hotel, and one of the investors who had been in the audience came up to me and he said, "You were so boring, you put that man to sleep." So I'm like, oh my God, I was boring? So I went back to the office. I'm like, I need help. So I got help. I have had so much media training, so much public speaking training. I got a lot of help. And then I have done it a lot. I do a lot of speaking. And you know that old saying, practice makes perfect? It really has helped me. And I will tell you, I practice a lot even today. Even today, if I'm going to be giving a presentation, I'll give it out loud. I'll read it out loud. And I'll ask my husband just for feedback. Not so much on the contents, because oftentimes he's not very interested in what I'm talking about, but it's more style. It's more tonality. It's more, am I pulling at the right strings here? So I think that's important too. Don't think you've ever got it done. Don't think you've ever polished it, because you can always get better.
Would you address what you see as the advantages and disadvantages of a servant leadership style?
Well, I think the advantages are you are so much more powerful as a team than you are by yourself. In fact, you can't do it by yourself. And so if you put people first and you empower them, amazing things can happen, right? The customers are better served. You deliver better results. It's a more rewarding experience. It's just a more rewarding experience for me. I'm hard pressed to find a disadvantage. I guess if there's a disadvantage, it would be understanding who you are as a person. And if you are purely, I am an individual contributor, and being part of a team doesn't work for me, I just want to be an individual contributor, then I would say go be an entrepreneur, or go be someone who doesn't need team to get it done. Now, I can't imagine who that is, but perhaps if you're an artist and you're creating, a painting, you don't need to have servant leadership in that regard. But if you're part of an ecosystem, if you're part of a team, I don't know what the disadvantage is. I really don't.
We have time for one more question. Your authenticity is refreshing. When it comes to personal branding and building your brand, what are the key ingredients to stand out from others and earn the opportunity to compete for the executive roles?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty important if you're early in your career to come up with that personal branding statement. And you typically should focus that branding statement on your craft. So for me, because I was a finance person for so long, I'm like, okay, what is my personal brand? What is my personal brand? How can I get people to know what I stand for and have some fun with it too? And so I got it. Cash is queen. So I have said cash is queen for decades. And, when I retired from the Home Depot, I got tiaras, I got glasses, the queen has retired. I mean, people just knew me as that. They had so much fun with it. And it actually is actually true too, oh, by the way. Cash is queen. So, if you come up with that early and then use it in your elevator speeches, you've got so much opportunity in an elevator, if we ever get back to there, and we will, to just talk, say, hey, I'm Carol, Cash is queen. You can just do it just like that. And people start to get to know you. They won't forget you. I think it's really important. And you can also, I guess, come at it through the lens of what you stand for from a social perspective too, which would be cool. But I like cash as queen.
Okay,
And that was our last
Carol,
question.
in the interest of time, I could certainly go on and listen to you for much, much longer, but to be respectful of your time, I want to thank you for this powerful and energizing discussion. We are so inspired by your leadership and by your commitment to people and progress. You have provided many actionable insights for those who are seeking to drive change and growth. Thank you all to our audience members for taking the time to participate in this session. I hope you are walking away from this conversation empowered by the change you want to see in business and society. This concludes our program, and have a nice afternoon.